Hi, folks. We'll give people a couple of minutes to dial in before we get started. Hi, folks. Hi. I think we're going to give people a couple more minutes to dial in. So hopefully at like 3 or 4 after, we'll get going. All right. I think we'll get going here in another minute. Thanks for showing up early. Please consider whether you'd be willing to be a scribe for the session. We don't need the blow by blow minutes, but it would be good to be able to capture the action items. Thank you. All right, it's 4 minutes after the top of the hour. It's time to get the administrative stuff out of the way so we can get to the meat of the meeting. Thank you all for dialing in for our virtual interim meeting here for the IETF DULT working group. I'm going to go over some things before we get started. First thing is our note well. Basically, this is all the rules and procedures that you need to follow. If you have any questions about this, please make sure to contact the chairs. You can ask others. There's a whole bunch of things in there about IPR, anti-harassment policies, etc. You can also scan that QR code to get to more information. So meeting tips. So remote meeting, if you're not speaking, please go ahead and mute. There's not a lot of us here, so I probably can take the video, but we'll try to use it, sparingly if we don't need it. Again, please state your name when you start. I'm Sean Turner. We'll get into this in a second. Who else is going to speak? So we're going through the administrivius. I do need a scribe. Is someone willing to take notes? All right, I can try my best to take some notes. We'll see what happens. I'll need everybody to review them though to make sure that we that I capture things properly. All right. I think we have an hour here, and I think the most of the time we were going to spend talking about the threat model, and then any other business that comes up at the end. So I think at this point I'm ready to hand it over to Maggie here, unless there's any objections. Anyone wants to add anything?
Sure.
All right, I'll stop sharing. I think we figured out last time we know how to drive the slides, so I'll let you go to it.
Yeah, so I didn't want it making slides for this, but I did push a new version. So I can go ahead and talk about that. So give me just 1 second to pull it up here, and then I will do that. 1 second. I'll screen share. I think you need to give me permission to do it. Wrong. Sorry, wrong one. I need the screen share permission, not the slide share permission. This is what I want us to look at. It says my hand is up to request screen share permission. I'm confused. I have to restart in order to actually be able to share the screen. So I need you to give me the permission to share again, and then I will share it. There you go. Okay.
So that's me granting it, not him. I'm sorry, and I'm sort of walking in cold on this, so I'm just clicking on cookie buttons.
This is what I wanted. Okay, good. So now you can all see what I'm seeing. Basically, in the last meeting, we talked about how the threat model document was pretty good to go, and we were trying to figure out how much of this document we had to kind of finish up before we could start working on the technical documents. And then there's also a little bit of a debate about whether or not some of the status of the technical documents were already good enough. And so one of the things that I did along with Jesse Lowell and Eva Galperin and Erica Olson was to go back and think about what some of the limitations of like currently deployed unwanted tracking technologies are, and then actually write those up. And so I just published a new version earlier today that does that and a bunch of other things. So you can see there's some like minor changes that I made around like capitalization of things. We don't really need to talk about any of that, but I'm just showing you the diff so you can see what has changed. But the big thing that has changed is this limitations of existing approaches to detecting and preventing unwanted tracking, which I put in the design consideration section. We can kind of debate about where these things should go, but at this point, I don't really think it makes sense to spend a lot more time on this document outside of kind of agreeing on what we think the priorities moving forward should be. So in addition to introducing the limitation section, I also added this priorities for the DULT working group section. And so that's what I want us to focus on. And so I will go down to that. There was also some other minor updates about like threat matrix and things that we had already talked about. So some of this was already in here. So as we discussed, in section 3, which is the security considerations, these were the types of things that we wanted to consider when we were designing the DULT protocol. And then, so this part is the new part. We discussed limitations of existing approaches. So the group of us agreed that there were kind of 6 different things that are limitations of existing implementation existing deployed implementation. So one thing is this, we're calling spotty implementation, but it's basically the idea that there's a discrepancy in how these things are implemented across platforms, across devices, which is the whole point of having a unified protocol. So I think just by implementing the protocol at all, we are addressing a lot of those concerns. The second one is around lack of customizability, which is interesting because there's a lot of debate about how much customizability there should be, but I think that's something that currently does not really exist. It's tracking protections are either on or they're off. And then another one is around difficulty finding and disabling tags. So basically thinking about, this is probably accessory protocol, thinking about how to make it easier for people to find things. There's a lot of discussion around remote disablement. I think we all kind of agreed that the accessory-based disablement was not going to work, but we think that we should potentially explore other ways of addressing the same kind of issues from another angle, like through the crowdsourced network. Then the other big thing we talked about was non-conformant tags. So we've talked a little bit about this here, and we didn't really know whether the protocol could reasonably address all the different concerns. And I think the big thing that we wrote down for this was we think that a successful protocol would minimize the ability of non-conformant tags to access the crowdsourced network. And then another thing that I talked about in the design considerations was around activities logs. So we thought about what a bare minimum for that might look like, and included it. And then we also talked a little bit about anti-theft mode because we didn't really talk about that in the main document. And basically, I think our consensus among the 4 of us was that we shouldn't support an anti-theft mode. So that paragraph basically says we shouldn't support an anti-theft mode. And so then if we go down to like the overall final priorities, this is what I came up with based on all the work that I've done and then on the discussion that I had with the other 3 people who I just mentioned, which is active scanning, passive scanning, non-conformant accessories, remote disablement, and then crowdsourced network activity logs. So in terms of setting our priorities for the technical documents, I think that they should look at these different 5 different areas and then figure out whether or not the documents that we have or the documents that we're planning to create at least engage with, if not ideally resolve, all the concerns that were listed in the aforementioned document. So I think the next steps are making sure people agree that these are things that should be priorities and then making a plan to address them.
Yeah, I'm not sure I do agree that these should be priorities. I guess like maybe we're taking a step back here. We're not doing very much technical work in this working group, as it turns out. It's moving very quickly, not moving very quickly. And so like I think like as I said at the last meeting, like probably the best thing to do is just to like write down what people are currently doing and mostly stop. Like in particular, I don't think we're going to do anything about non-conformant accessories because, like, I've thought about it a while, and I don't, and no one seems to have any plan for like doing anything really good. So, like, so I think if there's obvious things to do that someone hasn't done yet that should be written down, I suppose that's worth doing. But like at what 2.5 years in or whatever, trying to like do active, I think the given velocity does not really support the idea that we're going to do a lot of new technical work that hasn't been done already. Unless someone has like a lot more energy than has been exhibited so far, including me. By the way, I'm not trying to shade anybody else. I'm just guilty, but
Yeah, I mean, I can't answer that for anyone else. I mean, I'm the one who said I was going to do this document, and I have been doing it. So I can't comment on what other people's capacity are to work on other things. Maybe Brent, can you turn your video on?
Yeah, I think I agree with Ecker on particularly on the non-conforming accessories. That is colossally challenging, and I agree. Last meeting we talked about taking the win and leaving some stuff off this first version. So I guess my question is, what's kind of standard practice here when you have a charter that is very ambitious? You have some stuff that maybe the team is in the working group is suggesting, hey, let's take the win right now and leave some stuff off the first version of documents. How do we maybe capture priorities for a follow-on set of documents or a follow-on effort within the working group?
Well, I mean, there's a number of ways you could do that. You can just like publish the change the charter, and you can say we're just publishing what gets done now, and then basically put the whole thing, make it dormant until we come back with more energy to get the rest of it done. So essentially, you just document like what's the current state of play now. I don't know, Deb, have you got any feelings here?
I mean, it seems reasonable to me. Oh, yes, Deb. Deb, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Did that sigh come across the microphone? I'm sorry. I do think it's a good plan to document what you have, what the current state of play is, and then I do think we need to sort of pause this at least for a little bit until there's more energy. Maybe energy might be the wrong word for this. I don't know, but I mean, clearly beating people's heads against the wall for this at the moment is unfair, I think. But I would like to see something published, which is what we had, I think, agreed on at the last meeting.
I mean, so I mean, I've looked over like the technical documents, and my impression is that I'm sorry, I can't remember the names, but the sort of like dissecting tracking one that Brent was sort of responsible for is like largely in an okay state of play. That I'm not saying anything's dumb, but like getting pretty close. The sort of the one that like that Christina was sort of responsible for, I think kind of got really bogged down, and that's part of what I'm reacting to here, I think. But it got bogged down partly because we're trying to solve a bunch of problems. So I think like the way to finish that is like for me, if the working group wants to try to just like basically take the existing literature about how Apple's system works and write it, like literally write it in that document. And hopefully like Brent can maybe help with that, or at least could review it and make sure it's accurate. And like not try to invent anything, just literally write down what already exists. That seems like a lot more tractable problem that I could do in about a period of time. And I'm trying to remember what, so I think like I think the question like to be asked here is like, what remains to be like, have these be like minimally acceptable, rather than perfect. Like I say, I sort of didn't do that initially for this at this point with the with the funding document, because like that didn't seem to be the charter we'd agreed upon. But I think like I'm proposing that now, and if like the working group wants me to do that, I can probably execute that relatively quickly, because as I say, it's just transcription. um, um, I'm trying to think what like I think I'd have to review this new material in this document to see like how much of it I agree with, how much I didn't disagree with. And is there a fourth? I'm trying to remember.
Was, and we never actually got authors for it.
Oh, well, then we just don't do that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was the UT detection algorithm, like reference algorithm or baseline algorithm.
We do need something there. Is because someone also is it possible for someone to transcribe what people already do? I'm kind of looking at you, Brent.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
I respectfully rather not, it just because I don't want to accidentally leak out stuff that is not public. I'm happy to point people to my public documents. There's been some academic papers written on this, and there's shit for Maggie knows too, or Corbin knows about public documents, and then the transcribing probably would be pretty easy for just about anyone.
I mean, I think my big concern here is there's a couple of concerns. One, I don't think we can call what we've done a win at all. Just maybe that's a semantic thing. I don't think we've actually proposed anything that's addressing the problems that we've been trying to address. I mean, I think the point we're having this is because I'm just only invoking Apple because someone else invoked Apple, but like Apple's doesn't have things that I say in this document that we should have, that I've been saying for like 3 years we should do, and we haven't done. So like, I think there's two different questions of like, I understand from the practical point of view that maybe there isn't a lot of energy for people to work on things, but I'm not willing to call that a win at all. And so I think, yeah, I don't know, maybe I should just stop there.
Beck, are you still in the queue, or is Dev? I see you jumped in.
I did, just to point out that keeping a working group open sometimes allows organizations or vendors to claim that there's work being done when there's not. So it's not so much a matter of calling it a win per se, but being honest about where we are. So you can, by documenting the state of play today, you may not be able to call that a win, but it is a point where you can go back and say, this is what was here at this time, and this is where we were. If there becomes agreement that people are willing to work on moving forward, you can then start at that point rather than starting back at the beginning. So it's less about the win is just documenting where you are today, which you didn't, I don't know whether you had it before. I'm not tracking all that closely, but just to give you a different view of the word win.
Yeah, and I mean, I think in broad strokes, a lot of what we were trying to do in this section that the four of us worked on was to really try to articulate clearly what some of the limitations of the existing deployments look like. I know it's like tiny, you can't actually read all that, but the 6 different areas. And I think what I've heard is, okay, there's a lot of concern about addressing the non-conformant accessories in particular, and that maybe there's a lot of technical reasons why that's a really big challenge. But I don't think like active scanning or other passive finding algorithms, that those are actually untractable technical problems. Whether or not people have energy to do them is a different question. So I think I'm sort of like, if we need to document how things are today, like what more do we need than what we have in here? Because I think I'm feeling like I'm being asked to do a lot more work with of little benefit.
So this is me again, sorry, I'm just jumping in. The hell with the raising hands. So you're just documenting, this is just the threat document, right? Like you should be writing down what the threat is. Not necessarily, and maybe you can write a little bit about what happens today and what doesn't happen today, but the actual document should be, here's what the threat is. And if you've already done that, then we're done, right?
I'm thinking we're getting to the point, Maggie, where this document is done, and we can even put something in the document that says, you know, the documents X, Y, and Z don't address these, or do in some partial way, and call it a day. So that you're essentially, you've done the lion's share of the work at this point, and I think you can sit back and be like, we still need to fix all these things, and so we can document it all, and the next time we come around, if we come around again the next time, we can be like, okay, now we actually got to fix them.
I mean,
Yeah.
from my perspective, I think it's quite helpful to document the deficiencies of what we have. Those should either go in here or they should go in the documents that to specify the things one place or other. I think this needs to be moved around, so that's very helpful. I think to the extent to which there are straightforward things that one could say that would improve the situation, then we ought to say them. So I see you have some stuff about saying people should like. It's hard for me to read this, but like it seems like you're saying people should do more scanning on the platforms. That seems like something we could totally say. That's like a reasonable thing to say. And I think the thing I'm attempting to lobby against is like trying to do significant new technical invention in this working group at this point is the only thing I'm trying to lobby against. But I think the extent to which we're calling deficiencies, we absolutely should do that. That's like the job of security considerations, and the extent to which there are simple wins that are simply a matter of conformance, then those should also be at least discussed. But it seems like you've done that, so I think there probably, as Charlotte says, probably isn't too much work to be done here beyond whilst reviewing this material and debating it some.
But I do think the point here is that if we think we're at the point where we've done a lot of writing, and we think it's done, like at this point it is like, okay, what else do I need, like for like direction for Maggie, like, okay, well, what else do you think it needs to say? And even better yet, like, here's some text that addresses it. But I'll get out of the way. So Corbin?
Yeah, I was just gonna kind of plus one, I think what you said earlier to Maggie about the value of documenting that the threats aren't addressed. I think that is, while it can be a frustrating experience, there's value in it and something that can be pointed to for work and for driving change. So I think it would be helpful to have it, clear.
I think the thing that we've been trying to avoid in this document is necessarily, in some sense, kind of avoiding doing this because we didn't want to call out any particular manufacturers. So like if we look at like our implementation section, we talk about, as of this writing, major platforms do not currently implement these things, and we talk about some examples, but I think in general, I was kind of avoiding doing like a much more detailed like lay of the land, also because it's just going to be out of date. So I think what would be really helpful is like, I think we are saying that there's technical deficiencies. Maybe we could say them like a little bit more explicitly or clearly, but I think a lot of this is already there. And sort of the question is like, I was thinking about this, that the audience of this document was primarily for people who are going to be implementing the technical changes in the next stage of the working group, but it's kind of sounding like maybe the value of documenting these technical deficiencies is to explain to a broader audience what the problems are. So like, what do we think the audience for communicating this is? And then this might be what I'm about to say right now, but like what do we need to do to make it more clear, like where the gaps are? Because I think this is a very huge and unwieldy document. And I think if I was trying to communicate a lot of these concerns to an outside audience, I would probably write things differently. But a lot of what's in here is intended to be used to fix the problem, not just say what the problem is, what problems are.
All right, Brent.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. So I guess kind of two comments here. So I just noticed, Maggie, this is observation first, the statement under spotty implementation, current implementations of adult protocol, ... So I think strictly speaking, if we call the work within this working group, there is no implementation of adult protocol anywhere because we don't have ratified documents and we don't have any like compliance or any sort of certification testing that says any manufacturer of anything is compliant. And that's may seem a little nitpicky, but leading to maybe where the win is here. Right now, we have an industry specification that was not consensus based. We tried to collect as much feedback as possible. Apple and Google did to get a document for the accessory protocol that people felt was reasonable. So the win I see here is, although maybe that accessory protocol isn't substantially different than what was in the DULT accessory protocol, well, version 1 isn't substantially different than the current industry spec. We have additional documents that the working group has worked on to create a more complete story. And then once ratified, it's an IETF standard, which is a much higher level of documents, although they're side by side, they don't look that different, but to say it's we all support, Apple, Google, and every other manufacturer jumps on board, we support the IETF standard is a stronger statement and a win in my book.
Yeah, I think that's fair, but I think my point is that there are easier things that we could do, and I feel hesitant to want to give any document my blessing without at least considering these things that are very technically feasible and just haven't been done.
Sadiqa?
Yes, just in the spotty implementation section, as I read the second paragraph, for the Android side, it mentions passive scanning is not supported, meaning there are no automated alerts on Android. That's incorrect, actually. Just to wanted to.
Yeah, okay, we can fix it. I think it might be it's confusing because sometimes it's which types of passive scanning are supported, which types of tags. Is it all tags? Only certain types of tags? It can be more clear.
Yeah, happy to give more details. I mean, if you want to include in
Yeah,
the
you can just make a PR.
Yeah.
We can fix it.
Sounds good. Yeah, I think that would be great. Even on Apple, I believe that there is some active scanning somewhere after you get an alert, I believe. I'll leave that to Brent.
Yeah, but my definition of active scanning is not after you receive an alert. It's before you receive an alert.
Okay,
But this is also part of the reason why I didn't want to actually talk about individual manufacturers at all, because I don't really think that that's the main point here. The main point here is that things are different and it's really confusing.
I get that, but I think passive alerting ability is definitely a very, very big thing that is being done, and it works on Android today for compatible tags and air tags. So just wanted to clarify that point.
Mind if I go and add a tiny bit to that? So yeah, maybe we'll have to chat offline or over the email group. Siddiq's right. I think from my point of view, the quote passive UT detection on Android and iOS is very similar and has been that way for a couple of years. There might be slight performance differences in some places potentially, but the intention is they work very similarly. And then the active scanning is I think found in different places and has maybe some different capabilities and limitations on Android and iOS, but I think it's actually pretty on par too. We can go through maybe some of the details. The other thing that is a nomenclature issue, which could be catching us getting us caught up here a little bit is the notion of active and passive scanning is a Bluetooth notion too, which is how the scans are carried out. I think if you read some of the documentation online, you could, if you use active and passive scanning as Bluetooth terms, you could have a slightly different interpretation of what's actually built in Android. So maybe those terms are ones we actually want to reconsider for this document, because there's a slight opportunity to confuse them. I think you mean whether someone is actively scanning by pressing a button for an accessory versus their device is in the background doing scanning to try to passively to find an accessory. However, the implementation of either of those or both of those would be done with either active Bluetooth scanning, passive Bluetooth scanning, or a mix of the two.
I do define those in the document, but if it's confusing, we can always change that. This is what involves a user-initiated scan for nearby accessories.
All right, Tommy?
Hello. Tommy from Apple, although not working on these features, so I have different viewpoints and opinions. Also, haven't been following some of these meetings super closely recently, so maybe able to give a perspective from just like how it's looking now coming back to it. I guess, Maggie, I heard your comment earlier, kind of in response to some of the details that like it sounds like you don't want ideally this threat model document to focus too much on specific implementations or trying to say, oh, these are what they are. And like, I think that makes sense. And if anything, scanning through this, it feels like a lot of the details about implementation state can or should be removed, other than like as examples to bolster up what a particular threat is. Like, hey, this threat has been seen in these examples of particular snapshots of deployments. And then I think it makes a lot of sense. I totally hear you on the issues of what do actual deployments or do the specs that are the other documents in this group satisfy all of these threats. But it seems like that complaint, which is legitimate, is something that would be most appropriate for like the review comments or last call comments on those documents, or particularly like discussion about what should be done with the working group. Like I could imagine like a way forward where, we say, okay, like the threat model, good. Like we just find the threats, and we can have documents. We can decide to, kind of via rough consensus, ship a document that acknowledges that it doesn't mitigate all of those threats, and maybe rather than just saying you go dormant or closed, maybe there's like another thing that gets added to, like you could have like an experimental spec of like, here's like a version that hasn't actually been tested that would try to mitigate these threats as a starting point for people doing more work. Even if then there's not energy to actually like deploy those immediately, but it's a place where people could have that as a basis. But it feels like a lot of that discussion and that tension of like, are we satisfying these or mitigating these threats is beyond the scope of this document, because the point for this document seems like it should just be like lay out the threats as like, here they are. And then everyone else needs to be judged kind of in response to that list. What do you think?
Yes, I actually completely agree with you. So that's why I don't really want to talk a lot about like what Android does or what Apple does or whatever. So I just don't think that's really the point.
Yeah, agree. Okay, cool. So I support you in that, and maybe even like trim some of that stuff down.
All right, Ecker?
I think what I was going to say is mostly overtaken by what Tommy said.
Corbin?
I was just gonna, like, tying back to the conversation around active scanning and that it might mean multiple things, make a suggestion of manual scanning, or like moving along the lines of something that talks about the user interacting with UI, rather than kind of what could be happening below the surface, as a possibility. And then potentially, like, this might be delineated somewhere, but that that manual scan provides kind of the same UT alert flow. I'm guessing that's somewhere, but that it's not just identifying where the tracker is, but also gives the same kind of suite of tools in order to find it. Help the user, like, find the physical object.
Yeah, that makes sense. We can call it manual scanning. I honestly don't really care about what
Yeah.
it's called very much, as long as it's clear to people what it means and that it's different. Um, thinking also and relatedly to, like, Tommy's point about, I'm kind of wondering, like let's say that we decide that we want to publish the accessory protocol document. I think that the way that maybe I would be more in support of publishing it as it is now is if it either added the manual scanning, because right now, because I think I also do agree with Brett and Sadika that we need to distinguish between what is actually deployed today and what our documents say, because, like, what is defined today in our DULT protocol documents is a subset of what's actually deployed beyond, right? I mean, I know you updated the internet draft in January, but that was a really minor thing, right? But so, like, if there's any things that we're calling manual scanning or anything like that, none of that's in the DULT working group accessory protocol document. So I think that if we're saying, oh, we think manual scanning is important and that it's not in the accessory protocol document, I think what I think is either it should get put in there, or it should get put in a different document, or it should not get put in those documents, but it should say, we are publishing this, but we know it has this series of known limitations, and those limitations need to go in the technical spec, right? Not necessarily here, because this document doesn't know anything about what the technical specs are, so it can't say whether or not these technical specs have met the design or requirements, or address the security considerations, because we don't know what it's agnostic of what those technical limitations are.
Brent?
I think that's totally fair, Maggie. The one, and I think it's worth considering how to best put it into the accessory spec. One of the issues is the accessory spec is what accessory makers should do and how to do it, and then, but it's also peppered with other kind of best practices or suggestions of what the platform makers should do, but doesn't describe how they need to do it because it's an accessory protocol. I think a logical thing to consider is how to add a suggestion about, with the right verb for the requirements on including manual scanning. We can take that on.
Yeah, and I think one of the hard things with accessory protocol was, like, this first technical document that we had, and it was kind of doing a lot of different things, and it's not up for me to decide, but I think that maybe the answer is that we have different documents that have suggestions, and maybe manual scanning goes into that suggestion. I don't really have a strong feeling about that. I think it might be cleaner to actually have different documents, because I think the accessory protocol was taking over a lot of responsibility, some of which got moved to the threat model, and some of which is just kind of sitting there because we didn't make the other. We have the crowdsourced network document, but we didn't make any other ones other than those three.
Yeah, there's one really nuanced detail about manual scanning that impacts the accessory maker. The really nuanced detail is whether you do a Bluetooth passive scan from the platform, from the phone or tablet, versus a Bluetooth active scan. There's actually different requirements on the accessory in those two cases. So it's a good one that kind of bridges the gap. But yeah, agreed that maybe long term we have a cleaner separation of documents.
And if we do come up with a cleaner way to split the things up, we can always figure out how to do that via charter change or whatever. As long as we have a good explanation for our AD and they support it, then it's not that hard to change. Sidika?
Corbin, you are not on the queue anymore. Okay.
Yeah, I'm looking something up and I'm going to rejoin the queue.
Okay, right. Okay. Yeah, so I guess +1 to what Brent mentioned about the accessory document. Mainly the audience is the accessory makers. So I think the idea is providing the firmware to platforms to be able to do manual scan or sending automated alerts was the idea. Having said that, I think again in the threat doc, it still makes sense to definitely mention limitations. I don't know if it makes sense to kind of give a versioning or like as of this date, we think this is the state, kind of a conclusion here, so that again, if there will be an effort to go back to the document, platforms know what to do from that point. But I think I agree with Brent that accessory document is mainly for the tag manufacturers.
And I also think this is part of the challenge, is that if the accessory protocol is for the tag manufacturers, that in some cases is going to be the same people that are deploying the network, but not necessarily, right? So
It is not. Yeah, that's why I think when we say platforms or network owners, that's actually can be different. You're right. But what I'm saying is, I think that limitation should not be owned by the accessory document as it stands today, and definitely threat document can still mention this as a lacking point.
Yeah, I mean, I think for the implementation part, I think we can just cut any reference to any manufacturer and just say, like, especially for end users, like when it's not consistent about what there's different types of accessories and there's different networks and there's different unwanted tracking affordances like manual scanning and passive scanning, and it's confusing when all those things are not the same for every device, platform, accessory type. That's the only real point, right? And I think I'm not, again, that's the one that we're just going to address just by virtue of releasing a protocol, because if everyone adopts the protocol, then it's all the same.
Corbin?
Circling back to Brent's point about manual scanning being more, or not about the accessory itself. I do think there's value in somewhere, like separate document sounds good to me. But thinking about the goals of the group, goals of the protocol is intended to protect people against being unknowingly tracked, and the lack of manual scanning can be a big gap, especially when some platforms have it, some platforms don't. And part of the goal here is kind of uniformity for people who are concerned with this. So I do think there's value in another document that I don't know how it would be handled, because I know, this is a very specific, there's a specific way of doing things within industry standard work groups. But I just kind of am on the side of having some sort of addendum that talks about the importance of manual scanning to achieve the goal that we've set out, which is helping people. And I guess I'm kind of curious, for those who are more familiar with these types of work groups, like how an addendum document like that would work, if there's precedent there, if there's a reason we can't do it? Like just kind of understanding the inner workings.
We could do anything we want as long as it's in the charter. So if it's not in the charter, we can add to the charter. There's precedent for just about everything on the planet. So if the working group feels that there's a need and we get consensus that we need to do that, there's zero impediments to doing it other than making sure it gets in the charter. So again, if we have consensus, we can convince the AD, we can do anything. All right, so we got about 10 minutes left. I guess I want to make sure that we give Maggie some good marching orders here, because what I heard is this document, the threat document, is pretty well done. People are kind of nibbling here and there, maybe take some stuff out, but there's a lot of information there. So I just want to make sure that if we can get some people that will volunteer and give us some timelines for when they might be able to do that, so that we can get input in, so that we can act on it and basically get to the point where we can call this one done. And further, to see if Ecker might be able to give us maybe a time frame for when he might be able to do the transcription of what's actually documented now, so we can see what we're looking at.
So as I said in chat, I can provide a review of the threat model document by Shenzhen in terms of trying to transcribe what's already in the Apple thing or what's already in the public literature about Apple system. I don't know. Probably by mid-April, I can have something.
Okay. I mean, obviously, we're not going to like.
No, I understand that, and I tried to give something that was optimistic but credible.
Okay.
It probably really is only it's probably only a couple of days of work, but finding this couple of days is a little tricky for me. But I think, I guess I would want to hear from someone at Apple that they prefer to review it and confirm that they believe it is correct, because it's really ridiculous if we try to transcribe it and or just work it up on the public literature and then no one's going to commit to being right. I understand you don't want to leak information, but you got to be able to say it's right or wrong.
I'll get back to you with that an answer to that question, Ecker. It's a good question.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I mean, because I know there's some stuff about how you put some of the public key is in some weird places, and I know it's been written down, but like I say, I just don't want to. It's silly for us to have wrong. That's all I'm saying. Okay,
Yep.
Thanks.
Cool.
And so Sean, I think let's wait on Brent to have the answer, but I think I guess just for more reasons, I see Christine isn't here. So I'm working on this with her, but I would want to hear a message from you or someone else, official, go ahead and do this. So I'm not just stomping on everything she's done.
So, the interesting thing is that Christina has kind of switched gears over at Microsoft, and I think you're at this point free to do what you need to do.
That's fine. I just want to be a good coworker.
Yep. No. I appreciate that. Yeah, I'll send you something more formal.
Thank you.
All right, good stuff. Does anybody else want to volunteer to do a review and provide comments of the threat model document?
I can do that too. Yeah, of course, I'm much less technical, but the threat model I can support. And Maggie, if there's any specific areas that you need extra support in focusing in on, or a thought partner, I'm happy to support there.
Thank you. Based on, I think the other thing I just wanted to ask was based on what people said, these are the two things that I'm planning on doing imminently, which is remove specific references to manufacturers, because I just don't really think it's relevant, and then change the phrase active scanning to manual scanning. I think that's the big thing that we need to do now. I think on the accessory protocol side, I think Brent and Sidika need to decide how you are going to engage with the threat model document. Are you going to say this covers these things, it doesn't cover these things? Are you going to add advice for people about manual scanning? I think that's a thing that you need to think about what you want to do.
Sounds good. I feel like there can be a reference about reference in the accessory protocol potentially to the threat document, or we can find out something else. Noted. you mentioned, Maggie, remove the references to manufacturers. Does that also include the platforms as we talked about?
I'm really just talking about the spotty implementation thing where it says like Android doesn't have XYZ, because I just feel like that's not really contributing anything to. We could say, well, Android does have XYZ or Android doesn't have XYZ, but the point with the spotty implementation section is just like different platforms have different capabilities. They aren't all exactly the same. That's the only point that we're trying to make with that part there. And I don't think we actually talk about other platforms or manufacturers in any other part of the document, really. So yeah.
Got it. Sounds good.
So is the goal of it to more talk about the impact on people, that it's disparate across, people who need support?
Yeah. And like from the security considerations point of view, we talk about this earlier in the document where we talk about how if there are different limitations across platforms, an informed attacker could like intentionally give someone one type of put a tag from one manufacturer there because they know that person doesn't have a phone that can detect that type of tag, for example. So that's why it's important to have consistency.
If I may suggest, I think it's okay if we don't want to mention the platform names, but if we can include specific examples to make sure it's really the case today, because again, I think we probably want to close at a point where if we want to take a look at what we can do on the accessory platform side, right? The information is clear and somewhat actionable and correct there. So could be examples or something like that. Because I mean, what I'm trying to say is, I guess, let's say take passive scanning example, right? If we say passive scanning experience is different, I don't know what exactly that means. That's why I think in what way it's different. If there is more detail that could be helpful for further discussion.
Okay, great. Well, 2 minutes left. I guess I'm going to propose that we go back to the meeting cadence that we had before, which is like, basically on a monthly schedule. I will make sure to send out another doodle poll because I'm looking at maybe having a meeting the week of the 30th of March, and then we can see where we fall. And I'll check to make sure I can get everybody who is participating there, and we can see if we've made some progress. So I want to thank everyone for attending. And unless anybody has any final words, thank you very much.
Thank you. Take care,
All right,
everyone.
thanks.
all.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.